Just when will the temple in Jerusalem be destroyed? This was the first question that disciples asked Jesus during the Olivet Discourse. It had to do with not one stone being left upon another. We're going to look at that in this video. We've been working on a series of YouTube videos about the Olivet Discourse. This was a discourse when Jesus was on the Mount of Olives during the Passion Week. He spoke it to his disciples. The prophecy had to do with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Not one stone would be left upon another. The disciples, of course, had two questions. When will these temples buildings be destroyed? And secondly, what is the sign of the end of the world and the second coming? So the whole Olivet Discourse in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it had all together to do with which is known as the Great Tribulation. It's the time period of intense tribulation on the church prior to the second coming of Christ, and then also the last day and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Please consider subscribing to this channel. There's a little red button in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, let's look at the passage that the disciples ask when the stones of the temple will be thrown down. We read in Matthew 24, and there's parallel passages in Mark 13 and Luke 21. Jesus' disciples, they show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to him, "See you not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." And we looked in the last video about what that spiritually means, which we're going to review in an upcoming slide here. But as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, which has a spiritual meaning, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be? When shall these stones be thrown down?" And in other words, when will the temple be destroyed? The word thrown down there is katalua, which means to throw, dissolve, and destroy. And second question, what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? So in this video, we're going to look at that first question. When will these things happen? When will those stones be thrown down? In the passage we just read, there's actually two questions. Two questions. Now, there's false prophets that want to teach you that there's three questions, but there's only two. The two questions are, when shall the temple stones be thrown down? Secondly, what's the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Jesus' coming is at the end of the world. Now, the false prophets, which are out there in abundance, they falsely believe that Christ's coming is 1,000 years before the end of the world. There's this thing called the Millennium, and that's false. The Millennium is a symbolic language. It only shows up one place in the book of Revelation that refers to the church age. But they falsely believe and lead you down a really bad path of false prophecy. They're called premillennialists. And it's in usually quote-unquote Bible-believing church, Baptist church, and other churches that are fundamental in nature or Pentecostal in nature. And they usually teach this false doctrine about a future millennium. And they try to separate the last question, what shall be the sign of thy coming? And then there's 1,000 years, and then the end of the world. But that the language, the Greek, the structure of the language does not allow for that wrong interpretation. They falsely teach that when will the stones be thrown down? That's the one question. Second, when does Christ come back? That's the parousia, that it's a secret rapture. He comes back and it's secret, and God's people disappear and all the planes crash and things like that. And then thirdly, when's the sign of the end of the world? And they're thinking that 1,000 years later. That's not true. Here's why there's actually two questions, not three questions. When we look at the parallel passages in Mark 13 and Luke 21, it's very clear that there's two questions. Mark 13, tell us, when shall these things be, i.e. the stones of the temple thrown down? And secondly, what shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? Which means that's the second coming of Christ and the end of the world. The word "the" there is a definite article. It means the sign. And they in Luke 21:7, it's the same thing. When shall these things be? First question. And second question, what sign will there be when these things come to pass? Mark 13:4 and Luke 21:7 condense When Matthew gives a little bit more detail about the second coming of Christ and the end of the world, but both Mark and Luke combine those into one event because they do happen at the same time. So don't let the false prophets deceive you that there's three questions here. Okay, let's now go back and we're going to look at when is this destruction of the temple. When it is, and we're going to look at Mark 13, one of the parallel passages. Jesus answered, said, see these great buildings? And these great buildings refer to the temple buildings. And both the temple, the buildings represent the churches. The temple also represents the overall church. Both of those terms we looked in the last video as representing the churches. And the churches are full of saved and unsaved people. But Jesus said there will not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Thrown down is to be in dissolution, being dissolved or being scattered. And that's what happens to the church during the Great Tribulation. But the disciples, of course, will say, well, when's this going to happen? When? So I'm going to tag on this slide the previous video we did last time on the throwing down of the stones. And the stones represent individual believers, individual people in the church. But being thrown down is the opposite, we saw, of edifying. The church is typically over the last 2,000 years being edified or being built up, made bigger. But in the Great Tribulation, which the throwing down of the stones represents, that's what it's about. It's a tribulation on the church, the earthly church, which is full of saved and mostly unsaved people too. So the Great Tribulation, we see one of the key features, and we know it's a time of the loosing of Satan. The Antichrist comes on the scene. The abomination of desolation is set up. The abomination of desolation represents Satan's kingdom in dwelling in the church and running the churches. Most of the pastors and leaders are not saved. They're teaching false gospels and false prophecy, which we already see starting today to a large degree. There's a lack of truth, a lack of teaching. But the throwing down the stones, it's all about disunity, persecution. The term used in the Old Testament, and actually it's mentioned in Luke 21, is the church is being scattered. So please, if you have a chance, take a look at the last video we did. I'll tag it on this slide. Okay, so when is the Olivet Discourse? Now, Jesus answers that question. Jesus always answers our question, just like all our prayers are answered as well. But the answer here is not what they wanted to hear, because Jesus says, but of that day and hour knows no man. No, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Only God the Father knows. So the disciples ask, when? And Jesus is going to answer that by saying, you can see the what's going to happen, but you don't know the exact time. You don't know the day or the hour. You do know the times and the seasons, and we're going to look at that in an upcoming slide. Also, Mark 13, but of that day and hour knows no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. And Mark 13 adds, not the Son. And some people say, well, why wouldn't the Son know? But we have to remember that Jesus has made himself in subjection to the Father. The parable of 10 virgins is also in the Olivet Discourse, by the way. And Jesus continues saying, watch. We're to watch for the times and seasons of the end time. We don't know the day or hour, but we do know the times and the seasons. Watch, therefore, for you know neither the day nor hour wherein the Son of Man comes. But we do know the times and the seasons, and we're going to be looking at that in an upcoming slide. Okay, now let's dwell a little bit more on this thing about even the Son, because some people get tripped up on this. Why wouldn't the Son, Jesus Christ, know when he's coming back? He's God after all. But we see Mark 13 teaches us that. But we have to remember that Jesus has placed himself in subjection to the Father. He's in subjection to the Father to carry out his Father's will. Mark 14, he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, what I will, but what thou will. He puts himself in subjection to the Father. And that's where you have the relationship of father-son. The sons are supposed to be in subjection to their fathers. John 6, for I came down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. Jesus has placed himself in subjection to the Father. Okay, so now let's cover this thing. We don't know the day or the hour, but we can know the times and the seasons. We're commanded that we can know those. We need to study prophecy. Prophecy is a huge piece of the Bible. And people that make fun of prophecy or dismiss it as not important, most churches today don't even teach prophecy, if you notice that. 1 Thessalonians 5, but of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. We don't know the day or hour. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. We don't know the day or hour, but we should see the condition of the church. We can see the condition of the world. We can see the things that are warned about false teaching and disunity in the church and the decay of the church. We should see those are marks of the tribulation. Note 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And again, we've done videos on all of this. We have a whole video series on the books of the prophecy in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. But 2nd Thessalonians chapter 2, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and by our gathering together unto him, that's the last day, that's the resurrection day, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except two things happen. Two things, except there be a falling away first. That's the apostasy, which we are definitely in now. And we've done a video on that. And secondly, that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, which is the Antichrist. And we've done a whole series on the Antichrist, by the way. So we don't know the day or hour, but we can see, because of the falling away of people, it's a standoff of the church. And we see already today the church in decline. There's many Christians that aren't even going to church anymore. They've kind of had it. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, the Antichrist. And that marks the beginning of the Great Tribulation. It's the loosing of Satan. And Satan empowers the Antichrist. Okay, the times and the seasons. Here are some example of prophetic events that we can know. The church age. It's the millennium. The millennium is a symbolic reference to the church age. It's the salvation of God's people in the Spirit. No, our flesh is not saved. Yes, our soul will be saved when Christ returns to live in eternity with him in the new heavens and the new earth. The apostasy at the end of the church age, we're warned about that. We can see that today we meet all the signs of the apostasy. We are definitely in the apostasy. The Great Tribulation is that little season, and it's about spiritual things. It's not about physical earthquakes or physical wars. We're going to look in this series we're doing that's all spiritual. And then there's a time and a season, the last day, judgment day, the day of salvation, second coming of Christ, the eternity in new heavens, new earth. We can know those times and seasons. We just don't know the day or the hour of when they transition from one to the other. We watch, though, and that's what the command about. If we knew the time, the day and the hour, and unfortunately people have made mistakes by trying to predict dates and things like that, and even people that mean very well have done that and been wrong. But we're watching. We watch for his return. We're watching for those signs. Learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branches get tender, it puts forth leaves, you know that the summer is nigh. So likewise, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, even at the doors. So when we study the Olivet Discourse and we see all these things about spiritual wars and spiritual famines, and we see this false Christ that are rising and false prophets and the worldliness, the abomination of desolation in the church, we can see these things coming. We're watching for those things. We're not putting blinders on. We're not just saying everything is great. No, we're watching. When? Okay, so when? And so Jesus tells us when the end time is near, because he says, when ye therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, saying the holy place. That's a key point. And later it says, for then shall be great tribulation. When we see the abomination of desolation in the holy place, and we've done a whole series on the abomination of desolation, it's Satan's kingdom, it's worldliness in the church, where church is completely Babylon, worshiping other gods and idols, very sinful, allows for all type of wrong things, worldliness in the church, evil behavior, no church discipline, nothing. And to a large part, we see that already today. When we see that abomination of desolation, then that's what marks the Great Tribulation. We can surely know that time or that season that we've entered. And we know when we're in the Great Tribulation, we know that it's a little season, and that very shortly it'll be the day of Christ. We don't know the day or hour, but we sure can watch the times and the seasons. For then shall be great tribulation, such as what not since the beginning of this world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Look at the world's population. The whole tribulation on the Christian church of the world, that affects billions of people. That is great tribulation. It's never been like that before. 2 Thessalonians 2, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there's a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed. That man of sin being revealed, the Antichrist takes his seat in the temple. He's in the church. The abomination of desolation is there. Worldliness is in the church. It's the fateful combination of a worldly leader, politician in the church, and the church is following him and worshiping him. So the abomination of desolation is an important signpost. When we see that in the holy place is the church. I'll tag a video we've done on this. We've done a whole series on the abomination, desolation, but I'll put a particular video about the desolation of the holy place. But we see that as a signpost that we're in the Great Tribulation. That, and also the man of sin, the Antichrist, is taking a seat in the temple. Those are signposts. So we can know when the Great Tribulation is. We don't know the day or the hour of the second return of Christ. So we don't know that, what's going to happen. But we can know the Great Tribulation. Now, when we've done work on this before, we saw that the desolation comes because Satan is loosed. He's loosed from his prison, Revelation 20. He's empowering the Antichrist, the false worldly leader that wants to take his seat in the church, combines politics and religion together, and already today we see that happening. And the desolation comes by the fact that the churches have been taken captive by Satan's ministers. By and large, when we do have a minister in a church that believes in signs and wonders, they can be proud, they're arrogant, they're not teaching the Bible, they're false prophet, they might be a false Christ. The church is being led by false ministers. If you see somebody that says, I'm a leader and I saw a vision, or I see these things, I have dreams and things like that, run for the hills, because that's not a person of God. It's a false minister. And this results, the church is scattered. When you have a lot of unsaved people and saved people, there's naturally going to be division. Some people want to have worldly fun, and other people want to do more in the Bible. And you're going to have issues, not only in the church, but also in families. There's going to be people leaving the church. The churches even today are becoming disunified. They only find common ground about Christian contemporary music, perhaps. And it's very worldly music. And we see in the churches, true Christians can be spiritually killed. No, they're not physically killed. They're spiritually killed. It's when they're hated. They're hated so much. He that hates his brother is a murderer. They're persecuted. They're silenced in the church. It's the same as killing them. And these sin-sick churches, somebody that comes in and wants to do a Bible study, they look at him like he has three heads. And it's like, we're not going to do a Bible study. We'll read a book. We're going to do a study on something. We're going to have this fellowship group. And it's because it's all controlled by worldliness, which is the kingdom of Satan and his ministers. So the Great Tribulation we see, and we're going to have a whole video on this, but there's spiritual warfare during the Great Tribulation. That's why it's Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation, we have billions of people that go to church or are interested in the Christian religion. Never before could we say that. So now there's this division in the church. It's going to be spiritual warfare. It's like a tribulation that's never happened before. But the end is not yet, because it's the Great Tribulation. So we have the when of the Great Tribulation, but we don't have the end. We don't know how long it's going to last. We also see in Mark 13, when they shall lead you, deliver you, brother shall betray brother to death. Within families, within churches, the father, the son, the children rise against their parents, which is a sign of the apostasy as well, and shall cause them to be put to death. And again, that's spiritual death. You should be hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. Remember, this thing about killing and spiritual warfare, it's all about hate. The hate of Satan's kingdom hates God's kingdom. And we're going to see that in great display. Okay. And the Olivet Discourse examples, we're not going to go through these. We looked at this in the last video as well, but this is what the church looks like. False Christ, false prophets, which we already have to a large part already. Delivered to be afflicted, killed, spiritually persecuted, beaten in synagogues before leaders and kings, offended, family dissensions, betrayal. And we're hated. The real people that love the Word of God and want to live a life of holiness and we're hoping the church would come around, they're going to be hated. And we fall by the edge of the sword, led captivity. And Jerusalem, which is a symbol for the earthly church, is trodden down of the Gentiles. It's overrun by unsaved people, which we already see starting today. Just a quick summary of this video. The disciples' first question was, when will the temple be destroyed, the stones thrown down? And it has to do really with the church and the Great Tribulation. We cannot know the day or the hour, but we sure can know the times and the seasons, and we're actually commanded to watch for those. And when you hear in your churches they don't want to talk about prophecy, that's a dangerous thing. The apostasy we're in now, we're told to watch for that, we're in it. The man of sin being revealed is the next major event, and when we see that, we're in full-blown Great Tribulation. The abomination of desolation, Satan is loose, there's worldliness in the church, and there's spiritual warfare until that blessed day when Christ comes back and he delivers us from that. Please consider subscribing to this channel, and thank you very much for watching this video.